Falklands Conservation is concerned about the impact Brexit could have on conservation and wildlife funding here in the Falkland Islands. With Brexit incoming, the unanswered questions around replacing existing EU grants are becoming more urgent as organisations like FC look ahead into the future.
Falklands Conservation have been fairly reliant on some of these European Union funds. Like I said, we use the EU Best Fund for our conservation work, researching sei whales in Berkeley Sound. And the issue is that as an overseas territory, there's actually very few funds of money available for these sorts of projects. Many global funds won't fund overseas territories because of the links back to the UK, which is obviously considered a well-developed nation. And then on the other foot, there's UK funds that we don't have access to. So the main UK fund that we have access to at the moment is called the Darwin Plus Fund. And that's a brilliant fund. We're using it at the moment, but by its very nature, it's designed for smaller scale projects. So if there was any sort of large scale, ambitious conservation project that we need, we'd have to go down the same route as, for example, South Georgia with their incredible rat eradication programme. That needed something in the region of £10 million, and they had to do so much of that through private fundraising because there weren't these large funds available to them as an overseas territory. It's definitely fair to say that at the moment, this isn't a pro or anti-Brexit argument. We just want to make sure that wherever the funds come from, whether it's the UK government setting up a brand new fund, where the funds can be found internally in the Falkland Islands, whatever happens, we just want to make sure that there are those large-scale funds that are available for those ambitious projects to safeguard the wildlife here in the Falkland Islands.
The EU has offered for the UK to still have access to some environmental funds, like the Best and Life Fund, through 2020, if the UK continues to pay into them post-Brexit, an outcome that would seem unlikely under the current Brexit plans. In addition, the UK government has been slow to provide a commitment to ongoing support or funding to conservation and environmental efforts in the overseas territories.
So we've had some very useful audiences with UK government ministers, including ministers at DEFRA. So what's been particularly disappointing is to be at the period where we are now, where we were having these great conversations and this kind of reassurance, no, we won't leave any penguin behind, which kind of became a phrase that was being bandied around. And that, we're trying to look at ways to incorporate overseas territories into UK government departmental spending. Unfortunately, we found out a couple of months ago that this was not going to happen. And instead of trying to replicate the EU funds for biodiversity research as Best and Life, they are pointing towards the existing pot of Darwin Plus, which doesn't have a clear plan around whether that pot will even increase to absorb the extra demands, or how it would be structured better to assist the research projects that were structured well under Best and Life. So if you wanted to do long-term environmental research, for instance, you tended to go for Best or Life funding because it supported that kind of structure. Whereas now there's one application process and kind of one pot that we're being pointed towards, and it's external to UK government spending. So it puts it in a less secure position, certainly for NGOs.
Wildlife in the overseas territories makes up 90% of all the wildlife that the UK is responsible for, with wildlife in the Falklands being integral to the tourist and fishing industries. The Falkland Islands government currently provides small funds for environmental projects, but would need a further UK funding commitment before considering to expand the funding that is currently available.
I think there are more opportunities there that need exploring on the UK government side of things, certainly before we stand up and say we're going to absorb all of this and then administer and fund all environmental research across our area of expertise. And let's not forget, a lot of our NGOs also conduct research in South Georgia, which is administered by the UK government and not by us. So at what point does it become the Falkland Islands government's obligation to look after UK biodiversity when they will also be taking credit for that research that we would be doing? So it seems completely reasonable to ask for the status quo to be maintained, how we can generate that same feeling from the UK is something we're still trying to push for.
The UK government did request overseas territories to provide evidence of a need for ongoing funding back in July. Falklands Conservation did respond to this request with a comprehensive report about ongoing projects and funding options, but has since seen little movement from the UK government.